My dear friends, welcome to Rajashekhar classes on applied data science with Python. This is lecture number 598. In this lecture, we will try to understand convolutional neural networks, biological inspiration of visual cortex. Before understanding this lecture, I request you to go through my previous lecture, that is lecture number 597. So what they have done is they have taken a cat. Just see, they have taken a cat and they gave anesthesia to the cat. That's important, isn't it? If you give anesthesia to cat, what happens? Which means the cat cannot move. That's what it says. Cat cannot move. They have given anesthesia to this cat, and which means the cat can't move. A cat is going to sit static, isn't it? But its brain, everything is working, and they actually have a light bar. Just see in this particular image, you have something like light bar, isn't it? Just see, this is the light bar. Yes, they show something to the cat. You have cat here, isn't it? Just see, you have cat here, which is sitting, which is anesthesia, for which anesthesia is given. And there is a small probe which is called micro electrode. Just let me say, this is micro electrode. So they have connected this micro electrode to the brain of the cat, especially to the visual cortex, isn't it? So most mammals like monkeys, cats, all of us have a special area in brain called visual cortex. So they connected to the visual cortex and they started recording, isn't it? What they did, they started recording. Neuron also fires. Neuron is basically electric pulse. Imagine there is a neuron, and neuron can spike, which means an electric pulse, which means you can measure some electrical activity of neuron. So they realized that there are some neurons, there are some neurons which fire only when there is specific type of light pattern or specific type of light pattern. I can say it's a pattern basically. So this example shows if the light pattern is vertical, just see, if your light pattern is vertical, so there is a vertical light. Vertical means what? Vertical light, and everything around it is dark. When you see this, when your cat sees this vertical pattern, there is lot of stimulus, isn't it? Just observe in this diagram, there is a lot of stimulus. Just I request you to go through this page. There you can see lot of stimulus, electrical firing. The firing is happening, isn't it? When the light bar is horizontal, there is no activity, there is no stimulus, there is no activity. When the light bar is when it is horizontal, there is no stimulus. When it is vertical pattern, lot of stimulus, isn't it? When the light bar is almost vertical like this, what's happening here? There is some spike. So as we go from this point is important, as we go from fully vertical pattern to fully horizontal, the firing intensity reduces. So they realized that there must be some special neurons in the cat's brain which are firing whenever they see vertical edge or vertical bar. A very, very interesting finding. So there are some key findings of the research over the almost three decades. What are those key findings? There are some neurons in the visual cortex, or there are some neurons in the visual cortex. Visual cortex is a part of the brain that is responsible for all visual tasks. There are some neurons in the visual cortex that fires, that is important, that fire when when presented with the lines of specific angles, isn't it? Your line, they are that what it says. I will repeat. There are some neurons in the visual cortex that fire when presented with lines of specific angles, isn't it? That is important. At specific orientation of angles, isn't it? That's important. At specific orientation of angles. Similarly, there are other neurons which are firing. There are other neurons which are firing if light pattern is horizontal. They said it is very, very interesting because we have seen cat brain fire by just looking at specific light pattern. And with a lot of research, let me also show you a nice part in this video. This is how modern visual system understood. This is human. Let me say this is human brain, isn't it? The human brain has multiple layers of visual systems, isn't it? This whole part is called, which one? This whole part is called visual cortex, and light rays come through your retina. Just see, this is visual cortex. Your light rays will come through your retina, your eye. All these signals pass through very dense connections to the visual cortex. If something happened to it, if something happened to this visual cortex, if something happened to it, what happens? We lose our vision. And visual cortex itself is very, very complex thing. There are multiple layers of visual cortex. There is an area is called V1. There is an area is called V2. There is an area is called V3. There is an area is called V4. There is an area is called V3A and V3 by, there's an area is called V3 by VP. There are lots of areas and sub areas within the visual cortex. That's important. Just we are discussing about visual cortex, isn't it? So there is one area called V1, isn't it? There is one area called V1, also called as primary visual cortex, that is responsible for, they realized that there is a special region just to detect edges, which is literally like edge detector. This primary visual cortex, that is V1, is responsible for edge detect. This is edge detector system. If you think about it, brilliant system, and of course with a lot of experiments they realized that there are edge detector neurons. Similarly, there are neurons to detect motion detector neurons, not in primary visual cortex, but there are complex visual cortex like V2, V3, so on, isn't it? There are some neurons which can detect depth, isn't it? Color. There are some neurons which can detect color. There are some neurons which can detect shape. There are some neurons where shape means like circles, squares, etc., isn't it? There are some neurons which can detect what can detect? They can detect complex objects like faces, like literally neuron firing. If there is a face, isn't it? If there is a face, your neuron will fire. The most important thing is primary visual cortex is responsible for detecting edges. That's important. While there are more complex neurons for lots of tasks, like let's look at this. There is a very nice page from New York University. Just see this page, what it says. Your V1 represents motion, your V2 represents stereo. Stereo basically means we have two eyes, right? Most mammals has two eyes. Using these two eyes, they detect what is the depth in an image. That's important, isn't it? What about V3? Looks at color, and your V7 is responsible only for face recognition, and your V3B, isn't it? What is the purpose of your V3B? Is for segmentation, and V3A is for texture, and your V4. What is the purpose of V4? It is useful for object recognition. Your MT is for attention. Your MST is basically for visual memory, isn't it? I request all of you to go through this particular page. Anyway, I will provide this link in description section of the video. I have the link here on how these layers are connected. isn't it? Let me open this. This is the link. I will also happening. Let me just explain this video to you. So you have your let me say you have your V1, let me say, which is connected to V2 or V4. They behave like layers in neural network. The lowest layer, the lowest level layer, if I have an image of fish, let me say I have image of fish in the lower level, in the lower level, it detects like edges. Just see, it detects like edges. This is an edge. Just see, the fish has got different edges, isn't it? Yes, but V1 layer is connected to higher layers like V2, V4, and in turns it connects to V3, isn't it? There are lots of these connections, the layer-wise connections, and eventually one of your top layer, you have a neuron in top layer which says it is a fish. So what's happening here literally is, there is a hierarchical structure, isn't it? There is some, what is structure? There is hierarchical structure where you have seen in multi-layer perceptron. In multi-layer perceptrons, if you think, we have the structure, we have our input here, you have input layer, then there is one more layer of activation, there is one more layer of activation, and there is one more layer of activations, isn't it? So on and so forth. Similarly, even in visual cortex, various regions, so object recognition region fed input from other layers. So the lowest layer is edge detector, isn't it? From edge you can group them into regions. That is important. From edge you can group them into regions, and slowly these regions will be grouped into objects, isn't it? Complete objects like fish, isn't it? So this is what happening in our brain, isn't it? Just what are the key findings here? Again, the key takeaway is that there are special neurons for edge detector, motion, depth, color, shapes, and faces extra. There is nice hierarchical structure amongst various visual cortex layers like V1, V2, V3, so on. There is a layered structure which is very, very interesting. Actually, lots of image processing. Image processing is an area in computer science. Again, lots of electronics and communication and electronics and electrical engineering. Electrical engineering students also used to study this image processing, which has got a lot, which is very important in convolutional neural networks, isn't it? We will actually design convolution neural networks which are different from multi-layer perceptrons. Some concepts that we learned in multi-layer perceptrons are still relevant here, like ReLU activation, like all of your Adam optimizer. Lot of concepts in your MLP still valid for convolutional neural networks. We will learn some more additional concepts, especially the concepts of convolution, which is there in the name of convolution neural networks. Just go through this lecture. If you have any difficulty, please keep a comment. Thank you very much.